Episode 1. The Night It Put Itself Out. I had been the caretaker of St. Bartholomew's Church for 17 years. In all that time, I had seen candles flicker, bend, and even gutter out in drafts, but I had never seen one drown itself. It was a Tuesday night. Rain ticked against the stained glass windows, and the church was empty, but for me. I was wiping down the altar when I noticed the sanctuary candle, the one that's never supposed to go out, burning lower than usual. Its flame was small, trembling like it knew something I didn't. I leaned closer and froze. The wax wasn't dripping in thin rivulets down the side like normal. It was flooding, gushing over the rim of the glass holder, thick and molten, as though the candle had sprung a wound. The flame hissed, sputtered, and without so much as a gust of air, snuffed itself out. The sudden darkness pressed in on me. I touched the wax. It was still scalding hot, and as I did, I heard it. A whisper. Not from the air, from inside the wax. It wasn't language at first, more like a rasping sigh. But then, in a voice no louder than the creak of an old pew, it spoke my name. Elias. I yanked my hand back, heart pounding, the heat still biting my fingertips. The wax had pooled at the base of the altar in a wide, uneven circle. In the faint light from the votives nearby, I saw shapes in it, grooves that hadn't been there before. Letters. I bent down. It was a date. Tomorrow's date. And beneath it, a name I knew all too well. Sister Miriam. She'd been unwell for weeks, coughing through prayers, but she was still alive. A cold sweat crawled down my spine. I glanced back at the candle, now just a dark stump of wax. That's when I saw something move. From the corner of my eye, a single drop of molten wax rolled across the marble, uphill, toward the altar. It vanished underneath, as if pulled by something unseen. I backed away, breath quickening. Then the sound came, a slow, deliberate dripping. But the wax was no longer falling. It was rising. Thin, pale tendrils curled upward from the hardened pool, reaching like skeletal fingers toward where the flame had been, as if trying to relight itself. And just for a second, I thought I saw a face in those folds of cooling wax. Not Sister Miriam's, but something older, hungrier, watching me with eyes that hadn't blinked in centuries. The rain outside grew harder. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang once, though it wasn't the hour. I couldn't shake the feeling that the candle hadn't extinguished itself to end something, but to begin it. By morning, Sister Miriam was dead, and the candle was burning again. Episode 2. Wax over the eyes. They told me Sister Miriam's funeral would be small, just a few nuns, the priest, and me. But when I saw her laid out in the coffin, I knew something had gone terribly wrong. It wasn't her pale skin or the way her lips were pressed into a faint, unnatural smile. It was her eyes. They were sealed, not sewn shut, not closed in peaceful rest. Sealed with wax. Thick, white, glistening layers bulged from her sockets like the lids had been sculpted over by a mad craftsman. The sheen was fresh, so fresh that when I leaned closer, I thought I saw the surface still glisten, as if it were alive. Best not to look too closely, Father Dorian whispered, appearing beside me. His voice was tight, but I could hear the tremor in it. She had a candle by her bedside when she passed. It must have tipped onto her face, I asked. He didn't answer. The church felt colder than it had any right to in late summer. The air smelled faintly of incense, but beneath it lingered the acrid, sweet scent of hot wax. My stomach turned. I glanced at the altar and my breath caught. The sanctuary candle, the same one from the night before, was burning again, low, steady, and watching me. Father Dorian began the rites. His words echoed in the small space, but something about the way they bounced off the stone walls felt wrong. As he spoke, I noticed the other nuns shifting uneasily, their eyes not on the coffin, but on the candle. And then it happened. A soft pop, like air escaping a bubble, came from Sister Miriam's face. The wax over her left eye cracked. A thin, molten tear slid down her cheek and pooled beneath her chin. The nuns gasped. Father Dorian's voice faltered for a fraction of a second, but he pressed on. I couldn't move. My eyes were fixed on that drop of wax. It was still warm, steaming even, as it trickled down onto the satin pillow. And in that brief curl of rising steam, I swore I heard her voice. Just one word. Run. The rest of the service blurred. My hands trembled as I helped close the coffin. The wax had hardened again, but it seemed thicker now, as if sealing her in, locking her away. After the burial, I stayed behind. The graveyard was quiet except for the whisper of wind through the iron gate. I turned back toward the church and froze. In the tall, narrow window above the altar, the candle was still burning, but the flame wasn't its usual golden hue. It was white, cold, almost the same color as the wax that had covered her eyes. And though I was far from the door, I could smell it again, sweet, hot, clinging to my lungs. I knew then Sister Miriam hadn't just died. She'd been claimed, and whatever claimed her was still inside that candle. Episode 3. The choir went silent. It was the first Sunday without Sister Miriam. The pews were half empty, as if her absence had spread like a shadow over the congregation. Father Dorian insisted the youth choir sing as usual, to bring life back to the service. They stood in their white robes near the altar, 12 children, their voices bright, innocent. For a moment the church felt warm again, until I noticed the candle. The same sanctuary candle, the one that had drowned itself in wax, the one that had burned beside Sister Miriam's coffin. It was closer now, no longer on the high altar, but placed directly between the choir and the congregation, and its flame, it leaned toward them. I don't mean it flickered that way. I mean it bent, long, unnatural, reaching toward the children as they sang. The hymn rose, but so did something else. Heat. A wave of it rolled through the church, and the air grew thick, heavy. I could smell the wax melting faster than it should. Then I saw it. Tiny threads of molten wax began to run down the sides, but instead of falling to the holder, they stretched out, thin, trembling, toward the children's mouths. The first drop touched the lip of the smallest boy. He flinched mid-note but kept singing, his voice faltering for only a second. Another drop reached a girl beside him, curling over her lower lip like a parasite tasting the air. And then silence. Not all at once, no, it was worse than that. The voices stopped one by one, like candles being snuffed in sequence. I counted without meaning to. 9, 10, 11. The last to fall silent was Anna, the choir's lead. Her mouth froze open, but no sound came out. A thin layer of wax glistened across her lips, sealing them shut. Her wide eyes darted to me, pleading. I bolted forward, but Father Dorian stepped into my path, his hand gripping my shoulder with surprising force. "Do not interfere," he hissed. His eyes, they weren't afraid, they were reverent. By the time he let go, it was over. The children stood motionless, wax cooling on their lips. The candle's flame returned to normal, burning straight and still, as if nothing had happened. When the service ended, the children filed out without speaking. I followed Anna, desperate to see if she was all right. But she didn't go home. None of them did. They walked in perfect unison toward the old vestry, a place that hadn't been used in decades. I tried to follow, but the door slammed shut before I reached it. From behind it came a sound I will never forget. 12 voices, humming a single note, low, unbroken, and under that note, the soft, deliberate drip of wax. Episode 4. The confessional that smelled of wax. It had been 3 days since the choir fell silent. Anna and the other children hadn't returned to their homes, and no one in the congregation seemed willing to speak about it. That Sunday evening, I stayed late to lock up the church. The sanctuary was dim, lit only by the stubborn glow of the same cursed candle. Its flame trembled when I passed, as if it knew I was there. I was halfway to the door when I heard it. 3 slow knocks. They came from the old confessional. I hesitated. No one had used that booth in years. Father Dorian preferred the open confessional near the altar. Still, the knocks came again, followed by a voice. "Forgive me, Father, for I am still burning." The words made my skin crawl. My mind told me to leave, but something heavier than curiosity pulled me toward the wooden door. As I stepped inside the priest's side of the booth, the smell hit me. Not the warm scent of fresh wax. No, this was rancid, clinging. The smell of wax that had burned too long and turned sour. I pressed my ear to the thin screen. On the other side, the silhouette of a figure leaned forward. I tried to put it out, the voice whispered, trembling. It wouldn't let me. It crawled into me. "Who are you?" I asked. The figure exhaled, and I heard it, a faint crackling like cooling wax breaking apart. Before they could answer, something thick and warm dripped through the lattice. It splashed against my hand. I jerked back, staring at my palm. It was wax. Hot, milky white, clinging to my skin like it belonged there. The figure began to shake. "It's still inside," they gasped. "It's looking at you." I glanced through the lattice again and froze. Their face was half covered in wax, hardened in jagged streaks. One eye was visible, darting wildly. The other was gone, replaced by a smooth, glistening seal. Then, without warning, the booth door slammed shut on my side. I yanked the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The air grew hotter. The smell thickened until it felt like I was breathing through molten wax. From the other side, the figure's breathing slowed, turning into a faint hum, the same low, unbroken note I'd heard from the choir. Something slid under the divider, not paper, not cloth, a thin white taper candle still unlit, but warm to the touch. The lock clicked open. The other side was empty. I stumbled out into the sanctuary, clutching the candle. The sanctuary flame flickered hard, as if laughing at me. When I looked down, the candle in my hand had begun to melt, without fire. The wax ran down over my fingers, searing me. And from somewhere deep inside it, a whisper, "Your turn." Episode 5, The Sermon That Burned Backwards. By the following Sunday, the pews were fuller than I'd seen in weeks. I thought people had come out of some misplaced loyalty. But as I stood near the back, I realized their eyes weren't on Father Dorian. They were on the candle. It had been moved again, now at the very center of the altar, in full view. Its flame was brighter than usual, a white gold tongue swaying as though it could hear the rustle of every breath in the room. Father Dorian began his sermon, his voice steady at first, rising and falling with practiced cadence. I tried to listen, but my gaze kept snagging on the candle. Something was wrong with the flame. It didn't rise. It curled downward, bending unnaturally along the wax stem, as though it were being pulled into the candle instead of away from it. The light seemed to sink, each flicker diving deeper into the body of wax. And then, the words changed. I don't mean Father Dorian's mouth moved differently. His lips still shaped the familiar verses. But what reached my ears was something else. Harsh syllables, guttural, wet. The language didn't belong to this century. I looked around. No one seemed startled. They nodded, smiled faintly, as though the words were nourishing them. I leaned toward Mrs. Calver, the old woman sitting beside me. "What is he saying?" I whispered. Her smile widened, eyes glassy. "The truth," she breathed. On the altar, the candle's wax was flowing upward now, against gravity, coating the wick in slow spirals. The flame disappeared entirely, swallowed, leaving the sanctuary bathed in a strange, cold luminescence. Father Dorian's voice grew louder, the foreign words vibrating in my ribs. The congregation began to hum along, a deep, resonant tone that made the wooden pews tremble. And in that glow, shapes formed inside the candle. At first, they looked like ripples in cooling wax. Then they became clearer, faces pressed against the translucent surface from within. Mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide with eternal pleading. I recognized some. Sister Miriam, Anna, the children. I stumbled forward, heart pounding. But as I reached the altar steps, the wax snapped back. The faces gone. The flame reignited, not golden, but bone white. Father Dorian turned to me mid-sermon, his expression almost gentle. "Would you like to finish it for me, Elias?" he asked. His tone was that of a teacher coaxing a child. The congregation twisted in their seats to look at me. Dozens of eyes, all reflecting the white flame. I didn't answer. My voice wouldn't work. The candle crackled softly. From its base, a single thread of molten wax began creeping down the altar steps toward my shoes. It paused at my toes, steaming against the cold stone floor, then curled around my foot like a leash. Episode 6, Wax Under the Skin. I didn't notice the mark until that night. After Father Dorian's sermon, I had gone home barefoot, my shoes ruined by the wax that had wrapped around my foot like a living thing. I'd scrubbed the skin raw, but the smell of it lingered, faint and sweet, clinging to me like a memory I couldn't shake. By midnight, the ache began, a deep, burning throb that pulsed with my heartbeat. I pulled back the bedsheet and froze. The wax wasn't gone. It had sunk into me, A pale, translucent sheen stretched across the top of my foot, smooth and hard like the surface of a candle left too long in the sun. Beneath it, something moved, slowly, like molten liquid swirling under glass. I pressed a finger to it and pain flared up my leg. But there was something else, a sound, a whisper. It wasn't in my ears, it was inside my skin. Words curling up from the marrow, so faint I could barely make them out. "Let me climb." Panic clawed at me. I grabbed a knife from my kitchen drawer and pressed the tip to the wax. The instant it touched, heat surged from my foot to my chest and I dropped the blade, gasping. A voice laughed inside me. That was when I saw the first vein change. The blue line running up my ankle deepened, not in color but in texture, turning waxy, stiff, branching upward like a candle drip tracing a wall. I tried to stay awake, to keep watch, but exhaustion hit me like a drug. My last conscious thought was of the candle's flame, and the way it had leaned toward me. When I woke, it was worse. The wax had reached my knee. My skin there was tight, glossy, and beneath it something shifted like it was pushing to break through. I ran my hand over it, slow, trembling, and felt an outline. Not random, not shapeless. A face, small, pressed from the inside, its mouth moving without sound. The eyes bulged, desperate. I recognized it. It was the youngest boy from the choir. I stumbled back, nearly falling. My leg screamed with pain, but it wasn't just mine anymore. I felt him inside it, his fear, his breathless pleading. The phone rang. I snatched it up, hoping for help. It was Father Dorian. "You can't fight it, Elias," he said, his voice smooth, almost tender. "It's not inside you to harm you. It's inside you to keep you." I hung up and grabbed the knife again, but this time, the wax shifted away from the blade, like it was retreating deeper into my muscles. And then the whisper returned, clearer now, threading up my spine like smoke, almost there. I knew it was climbing, and I knew exactly where it wanted to reach. My heart. Episode 7, The Candle That Remembered Names. I didn't go back to St. Bartholomew's for a week. The wax in my leg had hardened into something like scar tissue, cold, unyielding, but at least it had stopped climbing. I thought maybe it had given up. I was wrong. It was Thursday night when I woke to the smell. That same cloying sweetness. Faint at first, then thick enough to coat my tongue. I followed it into my living room. The candle was there. I hadn't brought it home. I swear I hadn't. Yet it sat on my coffee table, its flame steady and low, casting long, slow-moving shadows against the walls. I should have put it out, smashed it, thrown it out the window. But I didn't, because it was speaking. Not loudly, just under the crackle of the wick, like a voice hidden in static. I leaned in, straining to catch the words. It was saying names, one by one. Some I didn't recognize, others I knew too well. Mrs. Calver, Deacon Hale, and then mine. Elias. I jerked back. The flame bent toward me, elongating like a finger pointing directly at my chest. The wax at its base began to bubble, each pop releasing a faint hiss, as though the candle was savoring the sound of each name it spoke. The next morning, Mrs. Calver was found dead in her kitchen, a pool of hardened wax beneath her chair. That night, the candle was back in my living room. This time, it burned faster. The names came quicker, urgent, deliberate. With each one, the wax surged upward, engulfing more of the wick until the flame seemed to be choking itself. I started writing the names down, my hand shaking. I didn't know why. Maybe I thought if I had them on paper, they'd be real enough for someone else to believe me. When it said Anna, my pen snapped. I hadn't seen her since the choir fell silent. I didn't know if she was alive or dead. But hearing her name, it felt like the candle was making a promise. I lit every light in the house, trying to keep the shadows at bay. Still, the candle's glow seemed brighter than all of them. And then, without warning, the flame flared tall and white, so bright it blinded me. When my vision cleared, there was something new. Names, carved into the wax itself. Dozens of them, wrapping around the candle's body like the rings of a tree. Each letter was deep, jagged, as if carved from the inside. The last name at the very top was mine. The wax in my leg throbbed like a second heartbeat, and from the flame came a whisper I couldn't unhear. When your name is at the top, the wick reaches the end. Episode 8, The Baptism That Wouldn't End. It was raining the morning Father Dorian asked me to help with a baptism. His tone was casual, almost warm, like nothing in the last weeks had happened. I wanted to refuse, but something in his eyes told me I didn't have a choice. When I entered the church, the air was heavier than usual, thick with incense that didn't quite mask the sweet, suffocating scent of wax. The candle was there. Not on the altar this time. It stood on a small pedestal beside the baptismal font, its flame unnaturally still despite the draft from the open door. Its light seemed to crawl over the marble basin, touching every ripple in the water. The family arrived, a young couple carrying their infant swaddled in white. The baby's small cries echoed in the nave, sharp and fragile. Father Dorian began the rite. His words rolled in the familiar Latin cadence, but there was something else under them. Another voice, layered in the rhythm, too low for anyone else to hear. I stepped closer to the font. That's when I saw it. The water was moving, not in ripples from the priest's hand, but in slow, swirling currents, as if something beneath was stirring. A pale shimmer rose to the surface, and my stomach turned. It wasn't light. It was wax, thin and liquid, curling into milky ribbons that spread through the holy water. The baby's cries grew louder. Father Dorian dipped his hand into the water. When he lifted it, a single thread of molten wax stretched from his fingers back into the basin, refusing to break. He touched the child's forehead, and the wax slid from his hand onto the infant's skin. The screaming stopped instantly. Too instantly. The baby's eyes opened, wide, unblinking, and fixed on the candle. Its tiny chest rose and fell in slow, unnatural breaths. The wax on its forehead didn't cool. It pulsed as though alive. The parents didn't notice. They smiled, tears in their eyes, thinking they'd witnessed a blessing. But I could see it, the candle's flame flickering in time with the baby's heartbeat. Then the water in the font began to bubble. The wax thickened, climbing the basin's edges like a living tide. It touched my hand, and the cold shot straight into my bones. I staggered back, but no one else moved. Father Dorian leaned over the child and whispered something I couldn't hear. The candle's flame swelled, bright enough to throw long shadows up the vaulted ceiling. And then, just as quickly as it started, it stopped. The wax in the font solidified, pale and smooth as marble. The baby blinked, the pulsing at its forehead fading. The parents thanked Father Dorian and left. But as they walked away, I saw it. A faint white sheen creeping down the baby's cheek. Not water, wax. Episode 9, Wax Where the Bible Should Be. I came back to St. Bartholomew's the next morning for one reason only, to find the Bible. The night before, I'd had a dream. I was standing at the altar, alone. The great leather-bound Bible lay open before me, but the pages were blank, their edges melting, curling inward as if the words themselves were being devoured by heat. When I woke, the smell of wax still clung to my room. Inside the church, the air was dim and cool. The morning light filtered through the stained glass in fractured blues and reds. Father Dorian wasn't there, neither were the nuns. I walked straight to the altar and lifted the Bible's carved wooden cover. It wasn't there. In its place was a solid block of wax, the exact size and shape of the missing book. Its surface was pale and perfectly smooth except for one thing. Raised letters. They weren't English. They weren't Latin. The symbols were sharp, jagged, like they'd been gouged out from the inside. I reached out, tracing one with my fingertip. The wax was warm. And then, just like before, I heard it. That whisper, not in the air but inside the wax. It came in broken phrases, fragments of scripture twisted into something unrecognizable. The words shifted, repeating one line again and again. What is written must be consumed. My chest tightened. I looked around, half expecting Father Dorian to be watching. Instead, I saw the candle, standing at the far end of the altar, flame low, swaying as if in time with my breathing. Without thinking, I slid my fingers under the wax block, trying to lift it. It wouldn't budge. The moment I tried harder, heat surged up my arms, and my vision blurred. When it cleared, the letters on the wax had changed. They spelled my name. I staggered back, heart pounding, and knocked over one of the smaller altar candles. It rolled to my feet, still burning, and without hesitation, I pressed its flame to the block. The wax didn't melt. Instead, it grew. Threads of molten white snaked up the small candle's wick, snuffing it out like a predator devouring prey. The larger block seemed to pulse, slow, deliberate, as if feeding on the flame. From somewhere deep inside, it came a low, rhythmic sound. Not quite a voice, not quite a hum, more like breathing. I turned to leave and stopped cold. Every Bible in the pew racks was gone. In their place sat smaller, palm-sized blocks of wax, each bearing a single name. Some I recognized, others I didn't. The one nearest to me bore the name Anna, and under it, in tiny, perfect letters, her verse is almost finished. Episode 10, The Face Inside the Candle. I don't know why I didn't destroy it the moment I saw it. Maybe because deep down, I was afraid of what might be inside. The candle had grown taller since I'd last seen it. It shouldn't have. Candles shrink when they burn, but this one looked fuller, as if every death had fed it. The wax was layered like tree rings, each faintly translucent, hiding something beneath. It sat in the middle of my kitchen table. I hadn't brought it there. I don't remember unlocking the door. The flame was small, almost shy, but the light it gave off felt thick, heavy. It pulled my eyes in, and no matter how much I told myself not to, I leaned closer. That's when I saw the shape. Not just a ripple or shadow in the wax. This was clearer, sharper. The curve of a cheek, the ridge of a nose, a face. It was pressed against the inside of the candle as if trapped beneath the surface. The eyes were closed, the mouth slightly parted. Frozen mid-breath, I stared, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light. Then the eyes opened. I stumbled back so hard I knocked over a chair. The flame didn't flicker. The face turned slightly, following me, its features moving under the wax like something alive beneath ice. My first thought was Sister Miriam, but the face wasn't hers. It was Anna's. Her lips began to move. I couldn't hear words at first, just a muffled vibration that rattled the wax. Then, slowly, the sound slipped out, distorted and sticky, like speech pushed through syrup. "It's so cold." I reached for the candle without thinking, pressing my palms against the warm wax. Heat surged up my arms, and for a moment I could feel her skin against mine, soft and shaking. The wax around her mouth began to thin. I thought I could free her. I thought stupidly that I could pull her out. Then the flame flared white, and the wax moved. Not melted, moved. It surged upward, folding over her face like a hand shoving her back into the depths. Her mouth opened in a silent scream as she sank further inside, her features blurring until they were gone. The candle returned to its original shape, smooth, untouched. I yanked my hands away, but they were coated in fresh wax, still hot enough to burn. Beneath the pain, I felt it seeping in through my skin, crawling up my veins, finding the hardened paths that had been waiting since that night in the church. The whisper came again, not from the room but from inside me. "You touched her, now you keep her." I looked down at my hands. The wax was already cooling, sealing over my knuckles like gloves I'd never take off. And deep under the surface, I could feel her fingers pressing back. Episode 11, The Night the Candles Walked. It started with a sound I couldn't place. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, my hands still wrapped in that thin, unyielding sheath of wax. The house was silent, but from somewhere far off, too far for it to be inside, I heard a faint tap. 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 It wasn't random, it was rhythmic. I got up, every muscle in me tight, and followed the sound to the front door. The moment I touched the knob, it stopped. Then came another sound, something small, falling, then another and another. I stepped outside. The street was empty except for the fog curling in from the churchyard. That's when I saw them, tiny specks of orange flickering in the mist, dozens of them bobbing at different heights like fireflies. I walked toward the glow and the shapes emerged. Candles, some short, some tall, all of them walking on thin streams of wax that hardened instantly with each step. The drips hit the ground, cooled, and cracked, leaving behind a trail like footprints. They moved in perfect lines, each flame swaying in the same unnatural rhythm, and they were heading for the church. When I reached the yard, I saw the doors of St. Bartholomew's wide open, the light inside cold and white. The candles poured in like soldiers returning from war, their wax feet sticking and peeling from the stone steps. Against my better judgment, I followed. The moment I crossed the threshold, the doors slammed shut behind me. The sound echoed through the nave, and every candle turned toward me at once. The sanctuary candle stood at the altar, taller than I'd ever seen it. its flame bent toward me like a neck craning to look closer. The smaller candles began to move again, but not toward the altar, toward me. Wax pooled around my shoes as they circled, the heat creeping up my legs, softening my muscles, slowing me. The smell was suffocating, sweet, heavy, and ancient. From somewhere deep in the church came a sound I'll never forget. A low hum, layered with voices. The kind of sound you feel in your teeth. The candles stopped moving. One by one, their flames stretched unnaturally, bending down until they touched the floor. Wax poured from their wicks in steady streams, spreading across the stone toward my feet. I tried to back away, but my shoes were sealed to the floor. The wax climbed higher, wrapping my ankles, my calves warm and relentless. The sanctuary candle's flame flared white and the hum grew louder. My chest vibrated with it. I could feel the wax in my hands and leg answering, heating, loosening, waking. Then in perfect unison, every candle whispered the same word, my name, and the floor beneath me began to move. Episode 12, The Altar That Drowned in Wax. The floor didn't just move, it breathed. I felt it under my shoes, the faint rise and fall, as if the stone itself had lungs. The wax around my legs tightened with each breath, pulling me toward the altar like I was part of some slow, inevitable tide. The sanctuary candle loomed taller than I'd ever seen, its flame no longer flickering but stretching upward in a straight white column. The smaller candles, dozens of them, had formed a perfect ring around the altar, their flames bending inward as though bowing. From the ceiling, wax began to fall, not in drips, but in long, heavy streams, like ropes descending from the rafters. They hit the floor with wet splats and spread outward, merging with the wax already creeping up my legs. The hum started again, low, resonant, impossible to place. My bones vibrated with it. The heat was unbearable now, but it didn't burn. It bound. I tried to scream, but the air was thick, heavy with the scent of molten wax and something older. Something like the breath of a sealed crypt. My hands, still encased from when I touched Anna's face inside the candle, began to soften, the wax melting into my skin until I couldn't tell where I ended and it began. Then the altar itself shuddered. The stone split down the middle with a sound like tearing cloth, and from the crack, a flood of molten wax surged upward, not spilling over, but rising, defying gravity, swelling higher and higher until it formed a massive, quivering wave. Inside that wave, faces moved, dozens of them, some screaming, some whispering, some perfectly still. Sister Miriam, Anna, the choir children, even Mrs. Calver, all trapped in the pale, translucent mass, their mouths opening and closing in silent hymns. The wave tipped forward. When it crashed, it didn't splash, it covered. The entire altar disappeared beneath a heaving blanket of wax, spilling across the nave in slow, unstoppable sheets. Pews were swallowed whole, statues entombed mid-prayer. The smaller candles were pulled under first, their flames snuffing out in sharp little hisses. The sanctuary candle did not fall. It stood in the center of the flood, flame blazing, growing brighter until the white light was all I could see. And then I heard it. Not a whisper this time. A voice, deep and unbroken, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. It is finished. The wax surged over my head. Warmth filled my ears, my mouth, my eyes. I didn't fight it. I couldn't. My last breath tasted sweet. In the darkness that followed, I felt myself hardening, cooling, becoming part of something vast and still. I was not alone. Far above, through layers of wax, the sanctuary candle kept burning, and I understood. It wasn't drowning us. It was keeping us.
Epilogue, The Keeper's Light. They tell the new caretaker not to touch the sanctuary candle. They don't explain why. I watch from my corner of the nave as he sweeps the altar. His steps slow, careful, eyes darting toward the flicker at the center. It's smaller now, only half the height it was on the night the church drowned, but still impossibly steady. A flame that never bows to the wind. Every so often, he glances over his shoulder, like he can feel it leaning toward him. He doesn't know yet that it is. I can't warn him. My mouth won't open anymore. My hands are fused together in my lap. My body frozen in a posture of quiet prayer. From the outside, I must look like a saint carved in pale stone. But I feel everything. The wax is my skin now. The others are here too, Sister Miriam beside me, Anna somewhere below. The choir scattered through the walls and the floor. We don't speak. We don't need to. The candle's hum fills us. Keeps us warm. Keeps us here. The caretaker stops sweeping. He's staring at the altar now. Head tilted. Brows drawn tight. I can tell, he's hearing it for the first time. The whisper. It will start with a name. It always does. The flame bends toward him, stretching like a reaching hand. He leans in, too close, and in the deepest dark of me, where the wax has turned to silence, I feel it again, the slow, patient pull that never stops. The candle is hungry, and it has remembered another name.